to see you, Anne.
Okay, I'm going to click the Start Event button. Oh, I think Penelope has just clicked the Start Event button, which means that we are recording and we are welcoming people. And as we are welcoming people, hello, everyone. We're going to be doing lots of welcomes as people are coming in and joining us. And if you are coming in, hi, Anne Robertson is here, Alex Marsden is here, Esther Anatolitis is here, Penelope Benton's here on the keyboards. But as you're coming in, have a look at, find the chat window, everyone, and just tell us where you are, where you have just connected in from. I know that we have got many hundreds of people who are registered for this. We've got 184 people online already, 185. That means that it's going to make our conversation very animated as we try to negotiate this many people. It's so fantastic. The response has been so great. So please, everyone, as you're coming in, have a look at the chat section and type us just a hello and where you are. It is just fascinating to know where everyone is. I can see attendees starting to come in. Hello, Alicia Longsdale. Hello, Adam Simmons. It's obviously an alphabetical list. Hello, Bernie Fitzgerald. Oh, my goodness. Hello, Carolyn Downer. Nice to see you. Dave Blumenstein. Oh, hello, Claire Watson. Now we found the chat interface. Jack Dunbar from Leipzig. Hello. I spent some wonderful time living in Germany some years ago, quite close to Leipzig. I miss it very much. We've got Hobart. We've got Brisbane, Rydalmere, Jasper's Brush, Ghana Country. Artspace Mackay. Hello, Artspace Mackay. Hello, Delwyn. Michaela Nutt. Nice to see you from London. Oh, goodness me. This is a big band getting together now. This is just extraordinary. Oh, goodness. Now, I have just lost how many of us are still joining. But yes, please come on in. And let us know where you're coming from. This is just amazing. Oh, goodness me. Now, who has got, oh, look at that. Now, Penelope is just reminding us, those of us who are sitting on desktops, which is obviously those of us who are presenters, to turn off our notifications and other things that are beeping in your background there. I cannot stand those and never use them. But if your machine might be doing some beeping, maybe turn those off. So many people joining us. We're up to 227 of us. Madubra. Hello from Two Horned Dog Studio in Williston, South Australia. Absolutely incredible. Now, a couple of people are saying that they can't see or hear anything. That I'm not sure if that is a majority of people. Some of us have a look at popping your mouse down to the bottom of the screen and looking at the audio settings that you can turn on there. But can I just hear from some people that you're able to hear? So some people can see and hear. Some people can see but not hear, and some people can't see or hear. Okay, so this is not a great start. Not a great start. But yes, please have a look at the various audio settings, and please note also that there is a live captioning service at the same time. We're just going to show you that address. You'll see now, if you're able to see the screen, that at the top, where it's just turned green there's a live captioning. You can click on the real-time text stream so that you can hear, so that you can read the captioning instead. Okay, so still some people not being able to, having some problems with different technologies. I can see, though, that there are many people who can both see and hear, so please do have a look at your end. Have you, in fact, enabled your the sound and the video components of this. It's a new system for a lot of us, this one. Make sure that we're overcoming the Zoom hacking and the sound issues of some of the other platforms, but I know that it's new for people. So do move your mouse to the bottom of the screen so that you can activate your image and sound. And a few of us still going there. So many people from all over Australia. We're now up to 255 attendees, and I'm just going to try and type some help for people who can't hear. So I'm just going to pop over into the chat interface. And meanwhile, Anne and Alex, how are you both? It's so great to have you here.
Oh, really great. Wonderful. Thanks so much for inviting us.
Thanks, Al. Thanks, Esther. And hello, Alex, and hello, everyone.
Mm.
Can you hear me?
We can. I've just put some put a little note there on the chat thing asking people to try moving their mouse to the bottom of the screen in order to activate. And there's yeah, I wonder. I'm just also checking on the settings to see if there's any way that I can just activate sound for everyone, but I can't see such a setting. And people still joining us. So hello, everyone. Ian Kemp is just saying that he has sound and vision now. Ian and others who are able to, can you tell us if you have just changed something? What did you just do, Ian, in order to
Share the
Bronwyn can also see now. Penelope's pointing out that the default is that everyone should be able to hear, that's just the settings from our point of view. So please have a look at the settings from your point of view. James Gear just says she just clicked everything until something worked, which, as we know, is always an entirely valid way of approaching a technological challenge. We had one earlier where Anne did something which just seemed counterproductive but completely improved sound, and I still am not quite sure how or why that worked. Diana McGurr also is just saying, hooray, sound and vision. So please, those of you who are getting that, someone's just saying it just took a moment to load. If you've just entered, Georgie is saying it can just take a little moment to load. And so we'll just give that a little bit more time for hopefully that to kind of tick over for people. This system does allow us to have up to 1,000 people apparently, which I just find extraordinary. Rebecca Mayo says she's on her iPhone and all is working. That is great. Dave Blumenstein, oh, hello, David, is saying that he had no sound and video, but now it suddenly just popped on. Which is also, as we know, a completely valid way of solving a technological problem. Vicky Green also saying it's now working. It just took a moment to load. Okay. All right. Well, at the risk of being enormously unpopular with the people who can't see or hear, we will have to make a start. We have got so much great things to talk about. But first of all, my name is Esther Anatolitis. I'm the Executive Director of NAVA. Right now, I am on the lands of the Bunurong and the Woiwurrung Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nations, quite close to the Yalukit Willam lands that are just literally just over there, past there, in this place, Naarm, Melbourne, which always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Their sovereignty has never been ceded. And I pay respects to elders past, present, to all First Nations people who are with us now. This is the first of NAVA's advocacy workshop program. Over the next couple of months, for those who would like to persevere with us in this exciting adventure on how on earth do we strengthen and focus our advocacy settings, what we're going to be doing for the next few months leading up to Arts Day on the Hill is engaging in some great training, some great workshops on advocacy for the arts, looking at the way in which we advocate, what we advocate for, and how we do that in the sector. Looking also at the media aspect of that when we engage with the public, the policy aspects, you know, how do we make sure that our advocacy is targeted in ways that can achieve policy change and hopefully funding change. And then also the political aspects of that. How do we engage in a political system that can often seem just really, really confusing and difficult and frustrating to navigate. Towards the end of this evening's session, I'm going to go into a lot of detail about all of the upcoming ones. But tonight's session is called, rather aptly, Advocacy in a Time of Coronavirus. Before I introduce Alex Marsden and Anne Robertson, I want to thank the entire NAVA team for the work that it has taken to put together this important and ambitious program, and Penelope Benton, who is on the text. Thank you so much to everyone for everything that it has taken to put this together. There is live captioning happening as part of this this evening. And hello to Helen, who is captioning. That link has gone out. It was on our screens earlier. It will appear again just now. So just up the top there, there is that link to live captioning. These sessions are also recorded, and we will get a transcript of them out as well. And so as well as that captioning, there will also be a recording of this and that transcript. Now I can see by looking at the screen there that a lot of people have had the sound and vision has just magically come on, and for others there is still a frustrating issue. Justine, who works with us, is just saying that it could be a bandwidth or streaming issue and not about personal settings, and that the audio and video just suddenly turned on when her computer caught up. It is very likely in future ones that we will need to look at different technologies again. We are thrilled and overwhelmed that there are so many of you. We're expecting, you know, a few dozen people. We're now up to 300 who have just joined us. So, advocacy in a time of coronavirus. What does it mean to be a good advocate? What are we advocating for? What are some of the barriers to that? And how has COVID-19 suddenly changed absolutely everything? I want to introduce two really critically important colleagues at this time. When we think about the relationships between NAVA, the Australian Museums and Galleries Association, and the National Public Galleries Alliance, as well as the myriad organisations that both of those two organisations and networks work with, our relationship and the ways in which we work together and advocate together are absolutely crucial for now and for the future of the arts. So let me introduce my colleagues in alphabetical order. First of all, Alex Marsden is the National Director of AMaGA, the Australian Museums and Galleries Association. Alex, welcome.
Thank you very much, Esther. You want me to carry on?
No, that's fine. There's probably all sorts of long welcomes we could give, but no, that is great. And Anne Robertson. Anne is the Director of the Public Galleries Association Victoria, and she is also a member of the National Public Galleries Alliance. Welcome, Anne.
Hi, Esther. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, me too. And I'm seeing some hellos on the text as well. And Kim Fowler is just pointing out that though she has had trouble with the sound and audio, the captioning is working for her, and so she's going to read. Sandra O'Malley is pointing out that there is also phone access to this, which has gone out into everyone's invitations and registration, and the number is there, and the participant pin as well. This is interesting. Debbie Talon has just said she pulled out her headset and bam, on it all came. It's funny you should say that, Debbie, because that is exactly the pro move that Anne Robertson adopted earlier today. We still have no idea why that worked. It does not make sense. So then it's just another thanks to everyone for persevering with this. So, Anne, what country are you on today?
I'm here on the Kulin Nation. I'm in Reservoir, so yeah, northern suburbs of Melbourne.
And Alex, where do we find you today?
Well, I am on the land of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people in Canberra. And again, I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and say hi to all our First Nations people who hopefully are joining us. Hi, everyone. And to everyone else, of course.
Now, we are getting some feedback that Anne was quieter than Alex and I, and so we will persevere with the projecting as though we really are speaking to a room full of 300 people. So let's start really big. As we know, advocacy for the arts, the ways in which we talk about the arts, the ways in which we elbow into a cluttered public conversation, the ways in which we try to argue for investment, for policy. The arts, we constantly hear all of those great statistics about how many people, 98% of people engage, 50,000 practicing professional artists, 600,000 workers in the creative industries. The creative industries all up, $111.7 billion, 6.5% of GDP. We know that there are so many interdependent industries like tourism, infrastructure, regional development, education, health. We all know. We know the evidence, we know the stats, but for some reason, the ways in which we express ourselves, the ways in which new work is made, the ways in which we show work and share work is not something that has captured consistent government focus, and we haven't been successful over the years in securing policy outcomes for the arts that survive past one election cycle. So that's the whole aim of this sustained advocacy program. How can we skill ourselves up, distribute our advocacy really, really well, and develop ourselves into a great team of national advocates, not just once off when it's needed, in the emergency, in a rush, in a panic, but in an ongoing way. So, Alex, let's start with you. What does advocacy mean to you, both in your organisational context, but also as a citizen, as a member of the public? What does advocacy mean to you?
Well, the Australian Museums and Galleries Association is actually an association with two very strong streams. It's first up, it's a membership association, so we're very focused on our members, museums, galleries, a range of other collecting institutions. And secondly, we are a peer advocacy body. That's what we say. And those two systems interact and feed into each other and inform each other, which I think makes us very, very strong. We get no government funding at the national level, and I say that because it means while we're not wealthy, we are independent, and we can therefore make comments, and we do more and more often, more strongly, as Esther's found out in the last month with all the various roundtables we've been in. So that in a
very welcome way.
That's AMaGA in a nutshell. And so our advocacy is really about influencing decision makers and influencing public opinion, and we're really into it for good, of course. There's no point being around if you can't make decent changes. There's no point being around if you can't make change for good and leave society and individuals better than when you arrived. That's the fundamental thing. For AMaGA itself, we have advocacy guidelines and principles, which was developed by the council because we weren't quite sure who or when we should intervene or not. So that's been a very clear piece of work for us over the last couple of years. And it's related to our vision statement, which of course is making sure there's a valued and thriving museum and gallery sector which inspires Australian culture. as an individual, I've always been in this space, either working within government, running NGOs outside, and I move between the two, and always absolutely animated by the desire to effect positive change for the world. Nothing small.
Well, I think that's an incredibly important way of doing it. I mean, as soon as we start to talk about advocacy, we're talking about the public. We're talking about the public good, about advancing something that can sometimes seem, when we talk about what's important to all of us, that can be a really challenging thing to articulate. Before I ask Anne a very similar, if not identical question, we're just getting some feedback that we need to speak a little bit more slowly so that we can pick up the captioning and also so that everyone can hear. It's kind of like, I think online events like this is sort of like if we all got together and instead of being in a room that we're not allowed to be in all together, we decided to hold a meeting in the bottom of a swimming pool and just, trying to the sound to each other. So we need to, project our bubbly voices and also try not to drown in the technical bubbles. And again, my apologies to everyone for the less than ideal sound for everyone, and great that others are already finding that it is kicking in, which is fantastic. So something, and that Alex was just saying at the outset there was the when you're not funded by government, it kind of gives you that independence that, you perhaps don't have that sense of what the consequences might be. But then, of course, as good advocates, even when we are publicly funded, we've got to think about the public good and what we can be doing and saying. So, and what does advocacy mean to you for the organisations that you work for and represent, but also you as a human and as an arts worker?
Great question, thank you. A lot of it will mirror what Alex has said, but I work with the Public Galleries Association of Victoria, which represents 54 galleries across the state. And our role is to do a lot of consultation with our members in order to be an effective advocate. And I'm also a member of a newly formed National Public Galleries Alliance, which represents over 300 galleries across Australia. And we have shared interests, and that is around capturing the impact of the sector and being able to convey that in meaningful ways to bring about positive change and build the capacity of the sector. So from a professional and a personal perspective, it's about giving voice to the organisations and artists that you represent, bringing about change, and be that incremental or significant change, which we'd all love. And
I'm just going to interrupt you there, Anne, because unfortunately your sound is still really bad. And so what we're going to do is I'll kind of explicate or paraphrase a bit of what Anne's saying, and we'll have kind of a shorter sentences conversation. So Anne was just talking about the Public Galleries Association, but also the National Public Galleries Alliance, which is a grouping of more than 300 organisations, which is incredible. And then that focus on advocacy. Oh, now I've just lost Anne entirely.
Someone suggested turning off video to help with volume. Did that help?
I can hear her.
Does that sound better?
I'm not sure. And say some more things, and we'll see if possibly not better.
Is that clearer?
Elias Alavi can hear you very clearly, so that's fantastic. Okay, let's try that for a little while, and then if not, I will just keep I'll keep kind of reiterating as though we're having more of a salesman conversation, where I'm saying that is I completely agree with you, Anne, about those issues that you have just articulated. So sorry to interrupt, Anne, and you were saying about the Alliance and the work that you do.
Yeah, the Alliance has formed relatively recently, and it is around capturing the impact of the public gallery sector in Australia, and to give voice to that, to bring about positive change, to build the capacity of the sector. And that really is the role of advocacy from both a professional and personal perspective, is to give voice to the organisations and individual artists that you represent, to bring about change, both incremental and significant change.
And I think that's absolutely vital, Anne. Both giving voice and bringing about change are two critical aspects of advocacy. Particularly, let's talk a little bit about that giving voice aspect, because something that a lot of us have been saying the last few weeks as we look at the responses to COVID-19, and in particular the voices in the media. In our field, in the visual arts, in craft and design, we tend not to have those household name performing artists, actors, musicians who can grab those headlines, who tend to have the voice that you know, people in sector organisations can't grab. How do you see that challenge in terms of giving voice when it can be difficult to capture in the public space?
I guess it's perseverance. We work really closely with our members to identify what the issues are, as well as all of their incredible achievements, you know, the number of exhibitions, the visitation, the number of artists they support. But really the key message around the visual arts is its contribution to the quality of life for everyone who takes part in it. And they're huge audiences. I mean, our recent benchmarking across Australia is over 16 million people attended a public gallery in Australia in 2017. So we have large audiences, but trying to convey that to politicians and funders is the trick, and it is quite complex. So collaboration is the other thing which I would add to advocacy. It's absolutely critical to be working with partners like AMaGA and NAVA.
Oh, absolutely. Collaboration being absolutely critical. And we've just got a comment from Tracy Cockburn on the chat. Does the National Public Galleries Alliance have a website or contact details? It is a recently formed alliance, and so I'm assuming that the answer is no. And is there a website as yet, or the group, I imagine, is still forming?
There isn't one as yet. So you can go through the individual organisations that are members. So it's the Contemporary Art Organisations of Australia, the Australian Craft and Design Centres, the University Art Museums, and then the state and territory public gallery bodies like us.
Yep, absolutely. Now, Kerry McKenzie's just pointing out the important role that arts has in our cultural identity, like the Japanese do with their National Living Treasures. And in fact, Australia had a National Living Treasures program until some years ago, including such people as the late Mari Funaki, who was a Japanese-Australian designer, jewellery maker, and then, of course, led the well-known Gallery Funaki here in Melbourne. But yes, I think there are the way that arts, you know, creates our cultural identity and our whole cultural sense of self is just so important. Let's talk about now some of the advocacy challenges for our sector, even sort of, you know, beyond or before the current crisis. And I should say, just evoking that, I hope that everywhere that everyone is calling in from and clicking in from tonight, I hope that you're all comfortable and well, and that you've got the stuff that you need, that you're able to connect with everyone who you need to. I think that's, yeah, it's just super important at this time. Let's talk about just the challenges for our sector, for advocating for the arts. What are those challenges, and what holds us back? Anne, what do you think, you know, with your stuff day to day, you know, you've got the data, you've got the networks. What holds us back as a sector?
I think it really is resourcing. We're all very overstretched, delivering services to our members, which are absolutely critical. And advocacy is, you know, it'd be lovely to have dedicated staff. We don't. We're like 1.2 staff, but it's absolutely vital to be providing services to members on a daily basis, but also trying to do the advocacy at a higher level.
Yep, that is absolutely right, Anne. I'm going to do my interrupt wrap up and then come back to you. So the challenge of not having enough resources to do that job really well, when you need to focus on supporting members and doing all those specific day-to-day things. So keeping your eye on what's in front of you while also trying to focus on that bigger picture. Yeah, it can feel quite split, quite jarring, can't it? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. I think also that the galleries and artists themselves are so busy making. So being advocates themselves is quite difficult. And I think another key thing is that our audiences, we don't really draw on our massive audiences to be effective advocates for the visual arts, and something we can definitely work towards.
Completely agree. So, of course, our members, our colleagues, the artists and galleries who we work with, they are far too busy to engage in the kind of advocacy that would be fantastic. And also audiences, you know, we need to absolutely get better at harnessing our audiences into constructive advocacy. Alex, what else holds us back? Not us as organisations, but also what holds the sector back, do you think? What's preventing us at the moment from being more effective advocates?
Yes, I've been thinking about this an awful lot. I've been in this job for 5 years. It's been a large part of my work. I haven't seen a lot of impact, I have to say, from what I've been doing in the advocacy space, being realistic, much as I try to. So I've been thinking about this a lot. I think about different approaches, and I'm thinking we've got all the facts and figures, as everyone's pointing out. I heard someone say the other day, which was very pointed and quite true. For being a sector that tells great stories, we're shit house at telling the story of who we are and what we do and why we're significant and what we are terrible at that. So I've also been thinking a lot, talking with Julian Merrick on the weekend, and many of you would have read his article in The Conversation yesterday. And I've been thinking about, and I'm also drawing upon my background as a strategic designer, as well as a historian and cultural heritage advisor. And I think we need to understand the mindset of the people we're trying to influence. I don't think we do that enough. I think in some respects I'd toss out everything else, perhaps not everything else because I'm just being dramatic now. But I would really, really like to focus very, very strongly on who are we trying to influence, what are their beliefs, what are their narratives about life and importance. And we were talking about this earlier today in terms of targeting not our arts minister. Well, we'll continue to target him, but we absolutely need to work out what's the big problem of the Minister for Tourism. And then we say, we have got a solution for you to support the arts and culture and history and heritage in your area. So we absolutely have, that's the biggest challenge. The other thing is thinking about, there's been this tension, this ongoing battle between utilitarian value and intrinsic value of the arts and culture going on. And I'm thinking, how can we work through this? And thinking, well, one of the examples is First Peoples land management, which is both incredibly important in terms of culture and traditional knowledge, but also very practical. You know, it's great land management. You know, so is that a way that we can actually start reframing and rephrasing what arts and culture are about? That's what I've been thinking.
I think that's really critical, Alex, and something that, you know, we often, you know, in the conversations that the three of us and our colleagues have together, one of the things we often say is that when we think about who we're advocating to and what meeting they've just had, what priorities they have, what the pressures are for their portfolio or their responsibilities. In a sense, the arts minister is already on side. They are the arts minister, and therefore they are motivated to want to achieve things in their portfolio. But the reason why they became the arts minister might not be because they passionately worked really, really hard for 20 and 30 years to get pre-selected and then get elected and then get onto the front bench. They really want to be the arts minister. They might have been given the ministry alongside another portfolio, and then have got a bit of a learning curve as well. And then, of course, and as Matt Warren has just pointed out, it would help if our name actually appeared on the title of the portfolio. Matt, we've got a whole session of this advocacy program devoted to just that. And I'll talk about the entire program in a little while towards the end of our conversation this evening. Yes, it would actually help. But the arts minister, it's also got to be someone who has got that great influence with other ministers. Other ministers and MPs need to be hearing about the arts, as Anne said, from audiences, from others in their electorate. And so it's this kind of, we need to be developing this great kind of nexus of this massive team of just excellent advocates who are having small conversations, big conversations, specific conversations. But when it comes to the specific way that we advocate, I think in the past, we have done far too much of, here are the issues from my organisation's point of view, therefore fund me. Or here are the issues from, my little section. Kate Bento-Vim is just pointing out that one of the challenges is finding and articulating a unified set of messages across our whole sector. For
the last month, haven't we? That's been a nice outcome of the last month, where we absolutely have been very coordinated, very unified, very clear. Had some impact, but not as much as we wanted. That's been one of the lovely positive things about that collaboration getting stronger and stronger.
Oh, it really has. I hope you've all seen there was an industry letter a few weeks ago with 130 of Australia's leading arts organisations. That letter went to the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the front bench who are part of the ERC, the Expenditure Review Committee, the opposition, every state minister, and the Lord Mayors of every major city in Australia, with one clear, consistent voice, and then we've all been articulating the specifics of that in a range of different ways. So we're in that funny place where we sort of we know in some ways we know what needs doing. In other ways, we are absolutely still learning and trying to work out how has the politics shifted, what needs to happen next. So let's talk now specifically about how we advocate for the arts. What are the specific things that we're doing at the moment? So Anne, when we think about advocacy for galleries and museums in general, for artists, what are the specific things that you do, and how do you do those things?
We very much work from data-driven advocacy to be effective advocates. So we are consulting with our members very regularly, especially over this period, in terms of one-to-one anecdotal conversations and then backed it up with data. But it's then getting it out there to the right people, working with NAVA and AMaGA and the local government associations, which are absolutely critical to our sector. They fund 41% of galleries across Australia, which is huge.
I'm just going to repeat that, Anne, because I think that's terribly important. Anne has just said not just about the importance of data-driven advocacy, but when we look at our relationships with local government. Tell me that percentage again, Anne.
41%.
So local government funds 41% of galleries in Australia. Those of you here from the performing arts will know that local government funds a great many performing arts centres as well, and something that we're going to pick up on in just a second, we talk more about COVID-19, is what is missing in relief and support for that. And unfortunately, those in government, local government, state government, and also universities, university galleries, they're not able to access the support stuff that has been made available so far. And we're all very worried about those organisations and colleagues working there. And what else in your approach? So that great data approach, collaboration, working with local government.
It's also, sorry, I've just lost my, I had just referring to some notes.
Oh, that's all right. I'm just pointing out now on the chat that people are pointing out that there are some really fantastic regional arts and cultural strategies. Ian Kemp is pointing out Ballarat's creative city strategy, where you'll find a united voice adopted by council on behalf of the community. And I will declare a conflict there. I was one of the independent critics and respondents to that, and I know that strategy very well. I thought it was a comprehensive start with a number of next steps to be taken, particularly about identifying clear measurables for that one. Albury's one, Bronwyn Colston is pointing out, is also a great one. And you were saying?
Yes, and in terms of the National Public Galleries Alliance, the benchmarking or snapshot that we've been doing is really about coming up with a shared story, which is something that Alex and that one of the people have raised in the chat session. It's having those common themes and consistent themes that we're all reiterating to all of the key stakeholders in the sector, be that local government, state government, federal government, our audiences, and then tailoring it to meet their needs, which is something that Alex pointed out. It's helping conveying it in ways that are meaningful to the audience, which we're very good at in terms of creating visual art, but we're not so good at in terms of advocacy. But we're getting there. I think the visual arts have been slower in working collaboratively. I think again that comes down to resourcing. We've just been fighting for our existence, and now we're starting to work collaboratively, which is amazing development.
Oh, here. It can be very difficult, as Anne was just saying, to work well together, to have that collaboration when you're really just struggling to get by. That's enormously frustrating, and completely agree, Anne, as well, that when we've got those compelling points that we're making, that are making that value really clear. Julian Bowen from WA saying if we could just demonstrate to right across Australia the ways in which they all already engage with the visual arts without even realising, that would be a great start. And something that I often say to politicians, which was told to me by the former director of the collection in Parliament House. Some of you may know Justine Van Moorik. She's recently left Parliament House. She's now at AGSA in Adelaide. She would often say that the visual arts has a secret weapon when it comes to advocacy, which is that we are already in every office, in every meeting room, in every corridor in Parliament House. That politicians are already engaging with the work, with your work. You know, I can see from the attendees list, there are artists here whose work is in Parliament House, and that is something that we want to make more use of. Now let's move on to not so much just how we advocate, but going back to Alex's point and the point that Anne just made about that clarity and that focused messaging. Alex, what do policymakers need to know in order to make good decisions? What do they need to be hearing from us so that they can make those well-informed decisions?
I think they need to know several things. One is that we understand where they're coming from. I'm sorry to beat that drum, but I absolutely believe that. They need to know that we understand where they're coming from and what their problem is. They need to understand sorry, I'll speak more slowly. They need to understand the impact of their decisions. They need to get a sense of the range of impacts and an understanding about the long term, the long scale of what we're talking about in terms of impacts on health and society and education and critical thinking and all those sorts of things. I'd go broader and say we need to go outside the sector. Don't underestimate the power of, for example, in New Zealand with Jacinda Ardern speaking when she first became PM. You know, and we all love her. That power of her being the PM, being the arts, talking about that value, even though she didn't actually in that first year add any extra funding, the impact of that is profound. You know, and we feel the loss. We feel the loss of that. I've got some. You know, I was looking at some. I did a little bit of work a while ago for Glam Peak, looking at what are some of the other ways in which other sectors have actually got their message across. And I was looking at examples that the strategy of silliness, you know, like with the ice over the head for the motor neurone disease, ice bucket challenge, which certainly got that in front of people. It was simple and it raised a heap of money. You've got the same-sex marriage campaign in Ireland. You know, who thought that would come in with? And that's because they reframed it. It wasn't about sex or religion, but it was about families and friends. So it's that reframing, you know, getting back to what, you know, what do decision makers want to hear? What do they need to know? They need to know that this is going to affect their family in a profoundly positive way, or that sort of thing. You know, and of course, don't underestimate the value of celebrities, which we've talked about before. We haven't got enough of those, and particularly if you're saying not enough of visual artists, we've got great visual artists who speak up. I also represent community museums. You know, what wonderful salt the earth, people who actually have been looking after voluntarily forever our most profoundly important dispersed national collection of stuff, of objects and of meaning, and trying to make them sexy, much as I love them, is quite hard. So there's some of the sorts of examples we're looking at. So coming in where they are, not thinking that our perception is the killer one.
Yeah, I think that is the, you know, and there's a number of challenges in what Alex has just outlined there. So the challenge of securing public attention, the challenge of securing political focus, you know, terribly important. The challenge of advocating in ways that are going to create change is sometimes different to what it takes to secure public attention. And sometimes we need to secure public attention in order to, you know, lead to that kind of change.
If I could just add, of course, there's a range of advocacy. I'm talking about being very vocal at the moment.
Yes, yes.
But, you know, one of the most effective ways I've found is really good data-driven submissions. And I have to say, when I sort of went, you know, mea culpa, I don't know how effective I've been. We have had some great submissions over the last few years, wonderful research from around the world and from our own members into digital economy submissions, into mental, you know, arts and mental ill health, into infrastructure Australia. You know, for the first time, has arts and culture as a key part of social infrastructure. That's massive, you know. So that's a different way. And of course, you use your research and your data and your experts and all of that for that. But I'm at the moment talking about the silliness or other things. That's the public, you know, that's a big public catching attention and getting, oh, is that what you're on about?
Oh, absolutely. Now, soon we're going to open up for some questions, and I see that there are plenty there. But I'm also just going to ask one last question to Anne and to Alex. Then we'll look at some specific questions, knowing that there are many, many, many of us. And so I'm going to apologise in advance if your question has scrolled by. Like I say, we're going to look at perhaps some different ways of doing this. We might ask questions in advance in future, but, you know, we'll see how we go. Penelope is making notes on the questions that will come up so that we can come back to them. So thank you very much, Penelope. And also, after some questions, I will also give us an outline of the entire NAVA Advocacy Program, and then leave us time for more questions about the entire program as well. So of everything that we've just discussed, trying to look at, you know, the mindset of people that we're influencing, focusing our data, as well as the need to really shift the way that we tell our public stories, the awkwardness of being independent from government in terms of not having that support, but then needing to advocate to government, and of course just the challenge of the arts being overlooked in areas of broader government focus. How has all of that been turned on its head with the current crisis? And how are you even starting to imagine or reimagine just the scale of the challenge that faces us now, given this crisis?
Yeah, it has been huge for everyone.
Yeah.
I've had a comment recently from a colleague that galleries were the first to close and they'll probably be the first to reopen, and I think that's a really positive thought. That I'm working in terms of oh, sorry, I've just lost my
oh, that's okay. I'll just rephrase because it's for the sound. So Anne was just saying that galleries were, of course, some of the first to close because of the physical distancing restrictions, but will also likely be the first to open, given it is possible to control numbers and access into galleries. It's not a situation where, you know, you're forced sitting next to someone else in a theatre or cinema, and that has a range of challenges associated with it. And
it provides so many opportunities. I mean, at the moment, galleries are working very closely with artists to develop online content and to be, you know, retain their engagement with their large audiences. And the prospect of reopening and planning what that will be with less, with a changed society and the role that visual arts can play during this period, but also as we go forward in terms of strengthening communities across Australia, is an incredible opportunity. And I think the work that we've all been doing with our different organisations has really been about has put us in a good position to work very strongly and very productively going forward. But I think that artists are really, as they always have been, at the centre of everything we do, and they'll be critical to helping us understand the complexity of what we're going through now and what its impacts actually are on our culture in the longer term. So I think galleries are in a great position to work with their artists during this period and develop some great content going forward.
Yeah, I think that's critical, and just pointing out there that this time of crisis has opened up collaboration, different ways of working together, and I guess also the ways that galleries, and particularly I should add regional galleries, have always known just how critical they are as a you know, a prominent member of the community, and so what that's going to mean opening up again. But certainly this reflective time to really assess what we do and how we do it, and to find those new collaborations has been critical. Alex, how has COVID-19 just turned everything on its head, and perhaps has exposed what some of the challenges and opportunities are for us as advocates for the arts?
Well, it's certainly, many organisations are in difficult, if not dire, straits. We have to recognise that. And the people who work with them and volunteer in them and, you know, are contracted to them, and all of that, the whole ecosystem's in dire straits. In fact, we're just sending out a survey of all our 1,400 plus members tomorrow to start looking at that. And the questions are not only financial impacts, but how are you? What can we do to help? What can other organisations do to help? I think it's going to, I don't think we can discuss the cumulative effect of the summer from hell and the plague on us. And I've been stressing to everyone that the cumulative effect is profound. I think we're going out of this to get a better understanding of the cultural ecosystem, and our job as advocates advocates is to make sure that that better understanding doesn't come at the end of 2 years when a lot of it's wrecked. Our job as advocates is to make sure that we express that and support that and argue for it now when interventions can be made to make it better. Okay, that's our core job as advocates at the time of COVID-19. Look, takeaways so far is there's a huge desire, I think Anne would have found that too, and you, Esther, for connection, and a huge desire for professional development, skills training, anything that actually can keep you connected with your community and your network. And I know we're all stepping up to do that with webinars with a range of technical challenges. we all have those. So there's that huge desire for connection. Bigger takeaways for me is really interesting in the fact that looking at dystopian fiction, always the heroes are soldiers and action men and all that sort of stuff. In the reality, in the dystopian reality, that our heroes are carers and communicators, and unsung jobs. And that's really interesting. We mustn't lose it. And the cultural creators, they're the heroes of this time. That's what we need to be stressing as well.
Oh, absolutely.
It's also accelerating into digital, but it's also accelerating a trend to non-digital and people loving the real and loving the environment, loving the earth. And, so it's interesting conversations. There's both online and digital, and there's both not. And we need to honour and support both of those trends, There's nothing easy about this.
I think that's a really valuable distinction. I mean, at the same time as we are online a lot and, many of us are rapidly getting over the Zoom meetings and, the Teams and Microsoft Teams and so on. We're also super hungry to be making things and doing things. I mean, I had no idea so many of you could make bread. I'm just mystified. This very much points to what we're all yearning for, which is ways to express ourselves, ways to make things, ways to critically engage, ways to reach out to each other, which of course is what the arts does all the time. Now, I want to give as much time as possible to questions. And because of that, because there are so many of us, what I'm going to do is go into the outline of the full NAVA Advocacy Program, so I can just be sure to have done that before some people might need to head off. We've still got a good half an hour together more, actually, so there's going to be plenty of time for questions. But I'd like to take you through the entire NAVA Advocacy Program because we've got some really interesting stuff coming up in the next couple of months, and it very much touches on the questions and the problems that Anne and Alex have just raised and that are all over the chat as well. I'm just going to share my screen and hope that this will work. So just bear with me for a second while I do that. I had no trouble doing that earlier, and am now just finding myself challenged in doing that. So just bear with me for a sec so I can just talk through what the entire program is. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the NAVA Advocacy Program is designed for making sure that that we can develop those skills that we really need. It's something that we've been thinking about and working on for a while. It's not going to be possible for me to share my screen. So I'm going to just talk you through it. And it's all there on the NAVA website. And in fact, you have all been sent, Debbie's just pointing out there might be too many people on at the moment for screen sharing to work. This is entirely possible. But you've all been sent the program. And so I'll just talk about it just in a high level way so that you've got a sense of what is coming up. So Arts Day on the Hill is our national day of focus on advocacy for the arts. Ideally, with Parliament sitting again by then, we will be at Parliament House. We'll be getting their attention. We'll be having those meetings. But at the moment, it's not possible to plan that kind of travel. But what we can plan is being together and having these kinds of conversations. So the first 4 weeks, it's broken up into 4-week chunks. The first 4 weeks looks at the arts specifically and advocacy for the arts. The next 4 weeks look at policy literacy, how we actually create change through policy, and what do we need to know in order to achieve that long-term change. The next 4 weeks look at media engagement. How do we achieve our policy goals by addressing the public, but also through the media, ultimately addressing politicians, making sure that we are demonstrating that the arts can achieve headlines. And in the last 4 weeks, look at the politics. How do we actually engage with the nitty-gritty of politics in order to achieve that? So next week, we're going to recap last year, Arts Day on the Hill last year, and we're going to introduce the NAVA Advocacy Framework. We're going to hear from a couple of last year's Arts Day on the Hill advocates, including Gadigal Wiradjuri artist Nadina Dixon and Hobart-based artist Selena De Carvalho. So that's this time next week. The week after, there'll be a focus on First Nations advocacy, once again with Nadina Dixon and also with Wesley Enoch, who many of you will know as Artistic Director of the Sydney Festival. He's also a board member of NAVA, and he has been co-facilitating the weekly Australia Council First Nations COVID-19 roundtable that happens on Friday afternoons. Then the following week, you'll see that our program, as I was saying, is broken up into chunks that are 4 weeks long. At the end of each 4 weeks, we're going to have a Q&A with a politician that reflects on what we've just covered in the 4 weeks that came before and allows us to test some of that thinking with that politician. And the 3 politicians are the co-chairs of the Parliamentary Friendship Group for Contemporary Arts and Culture, which we established last year ahead of the first Arts Day on the Hill. So the first Q&A with a politician, how to advocate for the arts, is John Alexander, the member for Bennelong. Then it's May by then, it's the 20th of May. We go into policy literacy. Where do the arts sit? And we're going to hear from John Daly, the CEO of the Grattan Institute, one of the best placed people in Australia to be talking about how government juggles its various policy priorities, what the economics and the social value and the economic arguments are for achieving that policy change and where the arts sits. John Daly is also I think a former member, possibly a current member of some of the Australia Council's research committees, and it's got some great arts engagement. The following week, global comparisons, looking at global cultural policy, who's doing this well. And we'll have Jackie Bailey, who's a global research and evaluation specialist with a focus on cultural policy. The very next week, and this came up in a comment that someone made earlier about the invisibility of the portfolio, we're going to talk about achieving policy goals from within an invisible portfolio. And our guest that week is Mike Murdoch AO, who is the former secretary of the former Department of Communications and the Arts. Mike has recently explained to me that one of the things that he was working on before he unexpectedly got the sack was an approach to looking at how the skills that Australia needs most, or the world needs most for the future of work and the future of the economy, are in fact creative skills, the skills of artists. He was preparing a range of research for that, and was suggesting significantly increased investment in the arts for that reason. We then go to our Q&A with the politician the following week, and that will be Maria Van Bacunul, MP, the member for Calwell. Then our 4 weeks on media engagement. We're going to start with Michaela Boland, a seasoned arts journalist. She would hate for me to describe her in that way. She is a journalist with ABC Arts, national arts journalist, has also worked with The Australian. The week after, our special guest will be George Megalogenis, one of Australia's very best political explainers. And in that session, we're going to do some news analysis and political analysis. What has made the news this week or this month, and why is it difficult for the arts to get that traction as advocates? Then the following week, it'll be the 1st of July by then, how to be a media spokesperson. We're going to hear from Abdullah and Jane Morey, the publicist. Some of you may remember that late last year, Abdul was very unexpectedly, in a very unwelcome way, was the subject of a politicised attack on his work. And he rather reluctantly became a media spokesperson. And we'll talk about how that played out and what some key learnings are. And then again, the Q&A with a politician, and that will be Adam Bant the week after as co-chair of the Parliamentary Friendship Group. Then our final month, political engagement. We're going to hear from Nicholas Pickard, Executive Director of Public Affairs at APRA AMCOS, Chair of the Australian Society of Authors, and a former advisor to state and federal Labor arts ministers, an excellent political strategist, one of the very best in the business. So great to have him there. Then the following week, some insights from the inside. Why is it that often our advocacy is not as successful as we hope with Conservative government? So it's very important that we are hearing from Conservative strategists as well. And that week we'll be hearing from Mark Textor, Director of Crosby Textor, who are the political campaign strategists who have won numerous elections for the Liberal Party in Australia and the Conservative Party in the UK. And the following week, just now ahead of Arts Day on the Hill, how to plan a meeting with a politician. And for that, we will have Helen O'Neill, who is Chair of Performing Arts Connections Australia. She was the founder of AMPAG, the Australian Major Performing Arts Group. She's a former director of the Australian Academy for the Humanities, and as a former advisor to several Labor arts ministers. So just, yeah, an incredible depth of experience there. The following, it's just going to be a Q&A with me as we get ready for Arts Day on the Hill and what we're planning. You'll hear a whole lot more about that as we lead up to the day. The 12th of August is Arts Day on the Hill, so pop that into your calendars now, all day, and we'll hear a lot more about that as we head towards that time. Now, the NAVA Advocacy Program is, of course, open to everyone with a preference for NAVA members. NAVA membership costs as little as $7.50 a month. It's enormously easy to join, and goodness me, there are so many benefits, and those benefits are on our website. And I very much encourage you to have a good look at that. Solidarity is strength, obviously, and at this time, very, very important to be connecting across and supporting all of your membership organisations, of course. And as I said at the beginning, and apologies again for everyone around the sound issues, we will look at our best approaches going forward as well. Debbie's got to feed the farm animals. Nice to see you, Debbie, and she's heading off. But now let's look at some questions, and we've got a good amount of time to be responding to questions from everyone. Now, Carolyn Phillips is asking for people to share their emails for or to email at Women's Arts Register. Email Carolyn Phillips at womensartsregister@gmail.com. So Anne is nodding, and Alex is also noting that. So we will absolutely do that. Yeah. Okay. Now, Alex.
Well, while you were talking, I thought, in the interest of time, Anne and I are both reading the questions, and there are a couple of ones about income and people having lost their job. And I'm thinking about the gig economy, and I'm thinking of big questions about what change do you want to see come out of this pandemic. And we want to see a change of more community-focused, communitarian, different democratic structures. And of course, UBI, Universal Basic Income, is one of those things that would, is actually gaining traction. Spain is about to introduce UBI. Iran introduced UBI in 2010, and people are still working. Not everyone's sitting around on their asses. So, let's think big as well. about those sorts of things we can start pushing for in other fields. The other
Well,
question.
that's right, and I think just on that, the fact that the job seeker payment has been doubled, it's going to be very interesting to see how government goes with trying to claw that back. And I think that discussion about a universal basic income is going to be a very important one.
The other thing that people were talking about was infrastructure, and absolutely, I am so targeting infrastructure. It's not funny in terms of where we're going to actually get some support for all of these institutions, and people, and the work. And there was just one thing I was feeding into the Australia Council's Indigenous Roundtable, was one of the priority projects for infrastructure was a national network of First Peoples Arts and Culture Centres. Now, wouldn't that be an amazing thing to work with Indigenous Australians about, trying to get that set up, really pouring some money into that and having that collaboration, that exploration, how that could work. That just seems to be some of the bigger thinking.
Absolutely. Now, there was a question further up. I'm just trying to scroll to it to find it, which was about ARIs and here we go. Angela Hughes, how can we ensure that ARIs around the country can survive through and after this in order to support emerging artists and not just established, albeit underfunded galleries? I think that is absolutely critical and something I focused on very briefly on my piece in Arts Hub last week about how we in fact need a new Myer inquiry. We need an entirely new comprehensive investigation into the visual arts more broadly, in particular given all of the things that making it very difficult to keep ARIs going. Anne, what's your advice for ARIs?
I think that I was going to raise this earlier in terms of politicians, is ensuring they understand the whole of the arts ecosystem and how of the visual arts ecosystem and how critical each part is in fulfilling one another, and ensuring that there is representation from those key areas when they have roundtables. ARIs are absolutely critical for part of the whole ecosystem. They work collaboratively with the public gallery system, with major institutions, etc. So they have an absolutely vital role. But I think funding generally of the visual arts needs to be reviewed, and the Australia Council needs to become truly national, and we'll be working towards that. Yeah.
I agree, Anne. I'm just going to paraphrase some of that for the issues of sound. First of all, Megan Taylor asking, what does ARI stand for? That's artist-run initiatives, and so it's a range of things. It could be a gallery, it could be a range of different platforms. It's basically artists creating those platforms for showing and presenting one another's work. There was that mythical time in Australia where inner city real estate was so cheap that people could move into a whole range of places or squat and create these extraordinary spaces, which then, of course, create, transform cultural value into property value. And it's the whole gentrification story we know so well, where artists are then pushed out and developers move in. And as Anne was just pointing out, we do need to look at national policy and investment. We do need specific funding that can support ARIs. We need to make sure that when policy or roundtable conversations are happening that involve a range of sector organisations, that ARIs are also at that table and that the voice is being heard. I think that's critical. Alex, got some advice for artist-run initiatives?
That's not my speciality.
That's okay. We can move to.
Oh, look! Every part of the ecosystem is so important. Certainly, the ARIs are amazingly fecund, I suppose you could say, in terms of what they produce. And I remember hearing Patricia Piccinini talking about the incredibly transformative effect her ARI had on her work and her development. So, really, really profoundly important. There's one other thing to say, which is everyone's given up now mentioning a national cultural policy. mentioning a cultural framework, which of course is really important, which would actually help shape all this and help have all the discussions about what's prioritised and what's not and why and what links, and have them link all nicely upwards and downwards and across. And this government doesn't believe in frameworks, and you know, it just doesn't in that sense. So, but the lack of it is absolutely profound. It sounds dry, but it's not dry. It's actually very profound in the lack of that helps shape what we do and helps shape the way in which we approach other ministries and helps shape the way in which we approach the public. So let's just say it. Really looking forward to helping develop one day.
And whether it's called a national cultural policy or not, it would just be nice if there was a plan. You know, something which looked at the interconnectedness. And I'm just going to a kind of a connected question from Lisa Tolka, who says last week on the webinar, The Role of the Artists and the Arts in Rescuing the Economy, which was presented by the Australia Institute, Sarah Hanson-Young recommended a creative commission. What do the presenters think of that suggestion? And in fact, this has been discussed quite a lot. There was a number of different models have been floating around for a while. There was a address to the National Press Club that Russell, I've just forgotten his surname, Russell Howcroft, thank you very much, former board member of the Melbourne Festival, panellist on the Bruin transfer, most people would know him, director of Y&R. He has talked about exactly such a thing. There have also been pushes to develop something like a creative industries federation in Australia. But yes, there is no national industry body that encompasses all of the arts. Anne or Alex, any thoughts on that? And I'm just going to look for our next question.
I think the key thing is the visual arts we have momentum behind us now.
Yes.
Collaboratively, and those are, I think, ensuring that identifying what our really critical issues are, making sure going forward, and then working out the best approach to that in terms of drawing on our audiences, drawing on our artists, drawing on our galleries, working collaboratively to get the message loud and clear to bring about change, because the Prime Minister is not going to change otherwise.
No, agreeing with Anne, doing my little agreeing with Anne segment, which is that, yes, the Prime Minister is not going to change unless we maintain that momentum. And yeah, there is some great momentum that is happening at the moment. There is a question from Andy Vag, who says that jobs around the arts have been casual and gig forever. Not many artists have actual jobs doing art. Is that what needs to change? How would that happen? State-run companies, private companies, and then would that compromise our independence? And Andy, that is truly one of the conundrums and age-old questions, and something that I'm sure many of you have often heard me say before. If you look at the evolution of the arts industry in Australia or anywhere in the world, a whole range of jobs have been created that didn't previously exist, including the jobs of the three of us. And at the same time, there are not, while the industry has developed, there are not more jobs for artists. Artists' incomes have not changed since the entire period of time that Professor Throsby and his team at Macquarie University have been putting those reports together for the Australia Council. And that notion of the jobs being casual and gig, it's that co-option, it's that frustration now where, our sector invented the gig economy and the portfolio career, and that is, of course, what is undermining us at the moment, where we're told that if you have not been employed for more than 12 months and you are casual, then you can't maintain your relationship with your employer. And, of course, we are still pushing very hard for that eligibility to change. And I think it's there's a difference between again, the performing arts and otherwise, orchestras, for example. There are examples where artists are employed full-time, but there isn't that ensemble understanding in the way that people create an exhibition or create a publication. Alex, what do you think about, what can change in terms of jobs for artists? This very much, I think, goes to the UBI as a public good as well.
I would loop right back to, I think, one of Anne's opening comments about lack of resources. And if you adequately funded some of the organisations that work with and support artists, that buy their work, that show their work, that exhibit, I mean, it's pretty basic, isn't it? you actually, if you had some of that, that would actually, and had a very strong functioning ecosystem that could commission great work and support emerging artists and support that system, that ecology, that would go quite some way, I think, to seeing support that we want to have. I mean, that's a very basic thing, but quite, basic's good.
Yes, it is.
I'd echo that. I came up as a visual artist and then started working with peak bodies in the visual arts. At the moment, in my role, I've been in this for 9 years. It's about building the capacity of public galleries to commission artists, to sell their work for their shops, to acquire their work for their collections, and also to hire them as their staff. I mean, a lot of artists work part-time or casually within the gallery sector in doing install and a whole range of roles, marketing, you name it, they're there, front of house. And so for me, building a strong, effective gallery sector is critical to supporting artists in Australia and giving them more opportunities to get their work out there.
And can I just add into that, and linking back to my long history, where we've got the lack of a major national body. And I used to work at the Australian Heritage Commission, which is one of the things coming out of Whitlam's period, which did set that and actually liaised with all the states. And one of my first jobs before I worked with them was as a young heritage historian in South Australia. And I got my first professional employment from a National State Grants Program grant from the Australian Heritage Commission. And so there's a certain cohort around Australia of all the historical archaeologists and heritage historians and all of that. They've all cut their teeth on a funded program, of work. That's where it happened. It actually supported them, brought them up. Now, and so the Heritage Commission was hugely significant, important, and it was so independent it got abolished by Howard government because they didn't like statutory authorities. However, what it did in those 30, 40 years was really, really impressive. So, and back to the Hope Inquiry, there was the Australia Council for the Arts set up, the Australian Heritage Commission, there was meant to be a Museums Commission set up, and Whitlam got sacked. So that didn't happen. And just look at the effect of not having had that for the last several decades.
Yep. Bring back Whitlam is one of the many strategies that we have discussed over the years. I mean, and to look at the history in that long time is really illuminating. Now, we've got just under 10 minutes left, so we're only going to be able to tackle a couple more questions. But of course, this program continues for a good couple of months, and so there's going to be so many ways to keep this conversation going. Marisa Yorglu says, at some point, I don't believe that governments, particularly federal and conservative, have any incentive to see experimental, participatory, political, democratic, diverse art. Economic value measures clearly aren't getting the point across. Are we barking up the wrong tree? Is our effort better placed making it culturally unacceptable not to support the arts?
Oh, so like a campaign like that, right? With the speeding people, I'd love to have something like that. I really would.
Oh, yeah. I'd really like that. Culturally unacceptable not to support the arts. I mean, that's exactly, can you imagine a kind of government where, you would just be absolutely, you'd be frowned upon, you'd be shunned and avoided, and the kinds of language we'd need to change. I mean, I think that's kind of, if Anne and Alex and I had to think about our kind of lifelong missions, that's probably it. How do you transform, the culture of government? Because it's not about transforming the Australian culture. We know from all the statistics that we can throw at each other how important the arts cultural practice, seeing work, making work. We know how important this is, and the challenge, as we say, is that information is not getting across. Brad Dietrich's got a question at a very specific level, which is a number of arts-based organisations and arts workers a couple of years ago put some work into RE's festivals approach at the local civic centre, put the approach to council to develop that space, heard nothing for 2 years. And now council has just put out a survey asking for ideas on how to use the space. And, how do we get them to pay attention? And I think, Brad, you've just pointed out one of the most enormously difficult things about political engagement and political advocacy, which we're going to keep touching on throughout this series, which is that, as Alex and Anne know, we can spend a lot of time building a relationship with a particular politician, a particular local councillor, and then they're gone. And that is enormously frustrating. How do you guys deal with that frustration, Anne, Alex, when that person just vanishes and you feel like, oh my goodness, I've got to start all over again?
Start all over again.
You can reuse documents.
Yeah, you can reuse documents. But just the whole,
Yeah,
that's the way. Part of the work we're doing as the National Public Gallery is to get the snapshot of the sector so that we can start talking, and we're working with AMaGA on a public value thing, so that the document is there, it's backed up with hard data, and we just present it in front of the next new people to come on the scene, and just really work solidly on how important the arts are to the Australian economy, to our well-being, to our culture. It is hard though.
Yeah, it really, really is.
I
Alex.
think it loops back to also trying to work out, you take a deep breath and try and work out, because they're not a clone of the previous person. So it's working out where they're coming from, what their expertise or interest is, and then repurposing, retargeting that. So that's quite a thing. So it's actually creating the personal connection. You have to do that. You just have to do that, and understand, get some sense of that, understanding where they're coming from and what they want to achieve, and then you start tailoring your offering to that. It takes time.
Yeah, here. I think for me, it's also, yes, tweak the documents, reuse the documents, as Penelope is also saying on the chat, and as Alex has said, thinking about what you've learnt from that past relationship and what can be reapplied, but also, and this is something I try to do, but, time also gets away from me, but it's thinking about how valuable was that relationship with that person, and can you maintain it even though they're no longer in that elected position? Some of my most really valued and trusted advisors and mentors are former ministers for the arts, former premiers, former councillors who were maybe just at that point of achieving what they wanted to, and then, because sometimes that political change is as surprising and unexpected to them as it is to us. Now, Kimberly Summer has just made a very important point, which is that we need to make arts advocacy sexy again for council/politicians. Yes, and by sexy, I'm sure she means that it needs to be something you want to engage and you want to spend time with people who are advocating. It's got to be seductive in the literal meaning of that word, that it draws you in, that you want to hear more, that it's something that is a popular and common conversation. Alex.
There's a comment there from Nicole Van Bruggen saying, I don't like the idea of losing our independence as artists to meet a politician's interests and ideologies. And I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that's my shitty job to do. Running this organisation is to understand that and to try and work out what's the best way to actually support the sector. It's not. I'm certainly not asking artists to do something to do Soviet realism or something. Absolutely not. No, that's our job. That's our job to actually work out the best way to advocate on your behalf.
Yeah, especially given, you know, you meet with an MP, whether it's in their office or in Parliament House, you've got half an hour at the very most. And so who have they just met with before? What's on the agenda this week? What bills, what legislation is in Parliament right now that the bell might ring if you're at Parliament and they need to leave right now? So the half hour you have might only be segments of 5 minutes at a time. So you need to be so aware of what their motivations are, and also what their ideology is. We'll talk about this more as we get into those political sessions that we'll talk about. How do you do your, you know, bit of research into their background to target what you're talking about in ways that, yeah, so absolutely not about losing our independence, but about making that politician realise that in fact their priorities and values not only align with ours, but that we can both achieve that in some pretty fantastic, exciting ways. Penelope's just put a link there with an article with Fiona Foley about how she presented her idea to appeal to government, and but to deliver what she wanted. So yeah, it's kind of how do we, you know, play the game in order to master it. Speaking of mastering, one thing that is always a challenge, the technologies, the sound. Can I just say an enormous thanks to the few hundred of us who have persevered and are still here. That is just extraordinary, even despite the sound challenges. Thank you all so very much for joining us, for the great questions, and in particular, the great conversation that you've all been having on the chat and on the Q&A mode. It has been great getting to see that. So thank you. An enormous thanks to Anne Robertson and to Alex Marsden. They are two of my trusted, admired colleagues. Working in the way that we do without these two would be impossible. We've got some really good work to do together, but I'm so glad that we got to have this conversation with you all. But thank you so much, Anne, and thank you so much, Alex.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Esther. Really was. And thank you very much, everyone out there. Great comments, great question. I hope we could help a little bit, and keep in touch.
Enormous thanks to Helen, our captioner this evening. Thank you, Penelope, for keeping us on the steady on the chat. And in just a little second, I'm going to, or one of us is going to press the button that says goodbye. Yeah,
Well
just
well done.
Thank you so much, everyone, and see you next week at the same time. You can click on that link, which can add all of these to your calendar, which is super fantastic. Again, NAVA membership, as little as $7.50 a month, so easy. And there will also be a handbook that will accompany this series so that you can use that as a workbook, and some other plans and surprises coming along the way. Thank you so much, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye. Keep safe.